Stephen King's The Long Walk is a masterpiece in dystopian fiction, but the movie made one crucial change that, in my opinion, completely changed the meaning of the story. Hey everyone, Fina here from Fina Reads. Welcome back to my channel. Today, not with a book review, not with a deep dive of book versus movie adaptation, but with a conversation about the ending in the book versus the ending of the Long Walk movie, and how the change in the ending, in my opinion, fundamentally changed the story and the underlying meaning of the Long Walk. Look, I'm usually not someone who dives deep into books and does a deep dive analysis and finds meaning in everything. Usually I read a book because I like the story, simple as that. But every now and then there is a book like The Long Walk that completely captures me, where I can't stop thinking about it after the first read, after a reread, hopefully after a second reread very soon. And the ending in the book was a big part of that for me. Not sure I actually need to do this, but just in case, spoiler warning, I will talk about the ending of both the book and the movie The Long Walk. If you haven't read it and or watched it, ideally both, you might not want to watch my video. But if you have, my assumption is that you're familiar with the premise of the book. It's 116-year-olds going on a walk until the last man is standing, and the last man can ask for anything as a prize. The world and the tone in the book, The Long Walk, is slightly different than in the movie. In the book, you have cheering crowds. The Long Walk is celebrated as something very important in that nation's life. People are tuning in, people are going there, people are cheering there everywhere. It's a little bit of a critique on a desensitized society and how something like this becomes a spectacle and how detached people are from reality. I actually highly recommend that you take a look at Todd's channel. It's Mysterious Galaxy. He did a fantastic review on the Long Walk book about exactly that, how Long Walk and Stephen King predicted TikTok and what stuff. Fantastic. So take a look at that if you want to get a deeper dive into that part of the story. It's also about a group of 16-year-old boys, teenagers, their hopes and fears and how they see the world, which is one of the things that I absolutely love about the book, that it is capable of helping me understand how 16-year-olds will think. I have never read a book that shows me how teenage boys actually function. And due to that young age, I think the book also captures Garrity's motivation or lack thereof for joining the Long Walk. He walks because he signed up. And that's essential to the story, right? Like, the horror part of it doesn't come from the boys being shot. It comes from that randomness, that meaningless, essentially, from Garrity's perspective. It's especially violent because there is no reason for him to be there. Yes, there's a little bit of talk in the book about the father being taken away on that side, but it's not his focus. It's not what he bases the reason for joining the Long Walk on. It's actually more used as kind of yet another show of how cruel that dystopian society is. Given that this is my second favorite King book, I was excited when I heard that they made an adaptation to the book, because this is one of those books where I quite often have thought about how would you adapt it, because it is so brutal on the page as well. The scenes are they're very vivid, and I've always wondered, like, how would you adapt that into a movie? And I think they did a fantastic job. First of all, I love this contrast of beautiful landscape and utter despair following the walkers, how the cinematography actually captured this weird contrast between the two. I loved a lot of the actors that were picked for the roles. Olsen especially showed this whole psychological trauma that you would go to when you just walk for miles and miles and miles and you cannot stop, you cannot sleep, you can't sit down, nothing. You're just walking. And not just that, but you're seeing that if you do not walk, you are going to die. And that fact, that has to completely mess with your head. Olsen, who was played by Ben Wong, did a fantastic job in showcasing that. I completely believe that he went into his head completely shut off from reality till at one point he decided to, quote unquote, sit down. I know it was a bit more, but you know what I mean. Same with Hamilton. I think he depicted the mayor perfectly. In the book, the mayor stands for the big society, right? But even in the movie, like this distant figure that is kind of completely separated from reality and doesn't even fully understand what's even going on in front of him and what's actually happening, like the horror that he's actually inflicting. And I find kind of this stoic character that Mark Hamill showed on the screen was fantastic. I don't mind change in a movie adaptation, especially if it helps to tell the story better. And one of these changes, I think, was the character of DeVries. In the movie, he seemed to be more of a guardian angel to Garrity, constantly pushing him forwards and pulling him with him, pulling him away from his mother. And because of that, because of his kind of more guardian nature in the movie, it makes this whole camaraderie between all of these characters much more solid. The other scene I already mentioned, the mother, that added a layer of emotions that I was not ready for. That was played so incredibly well. And my goodness, it really, like, the scene in the book is already crazy. And I always have to sit back and take a deep breath. And the movie brought it to life in such an amazing way. Yes, in the book, it was the girlfriend and not the mother. But I think the movie took a little bit away from that 16-year-old boy, which is why the mother then makes more sense. I think as you get older, motherly love has a bit more meaning than as a teenage boy, so that it is the girlfriend in the book. In my limited knowledge of 16-year-old boys, probably makes more sense. You know, hormones just hit differently when you're a teenager, I guess. So I wasn't bothered by the change of mother versus girlfriend, but I loved how well it was depicted in the movie. So let's talk about the ending. In the book, the last three characters are DeVries, Stebbins, and Garrity. The first one to go is DeVries. He just says, I can't do it anymore, sits down, and Stebbins and Garrity continue to walk. And after a short while longer, Garrity realizes that Stebbins is kind of out there already, and then he actually just falls over dead, not reacting anymore. Garrity even trying to shake him up and then not realizing that he is the last person walking. He sees kind of an ominous figure in the background, shrugs off the hands that are trying to pet his shoulder, and continues walking. It's an incredibly ambiguous ending because you don't really know what that means, which is a huge discussion point among readers of the book. To me, it's nihilistic at its core. The boy with no motivation to join the walk wins, and nothing changes. The system especially is not changing. It's the randomness of it all that really gets me with the book. Whereas in the movie ending, it's still Stebbins, DeVries, and Garrity who are the three last men, but then Stebbins just stops walking. He's basically saying, I'm done, I have a cold, I can't do this anymore. He goes through this whole narration of him being the rabbit, and then he falls away and is being shot. And then we see DeVries sacrificing him first, but Garrity pulling him back up and basically saying, hey, I want you to walk with me for just a little bit more. And then as he pushes DeVries forward, Garrity falls back, sits down, and is being shot. And DeVries is the one that can't believe what's happening right now and then actually winning the walk. Besides the fact that a different character is winning, which is one thing, the next part of the story is what I find interesting and what to me is changing the whole meaning of the story. So DeVries is the winner. He is being approached by the mayor and asked for his last wish. And DeVries says, I want a gun, and points the gun at the mayor and then ends up shooting him. And the reasoning for that is Garrity told him a couple of miles ago that his reason for joining the walk is to get revenge on his father. We see kind of a backflash in the movie where the father's being pulled out of their home and then being shot by the mayor in front of his mother and himself. And he says he wants to shoot the mayor as a revenge, essentially. The mayor is not a placeholder for a bigger society in the movie. The mayor is actually very much a person in the movie that Garrity in particular wants revenge on. And then a little bit later in the movie, we see that DeVries again takes on that guardian angel role and actually talks Garrity out of the revenge story and saying, like, the motivation of living your life should not be revenge. It should be the beauty of life, whatever it is he is actually saying. But he's then using his own life as an example, saying, like, hey, I had a really shitty childhood. Everything went wrong, but I decided to see the positive in it and live my life in a positive manner and use the winning of the long walk then to enact change. And he actually pulls Garrity out of that revenge story. And that's why that ending of the movie is so interesting, because now you're seeing DeVries, who had a very positive outlook on life, all of a sudden being so damaged by society, by that long walk, that he now decides to take on the revenge of Garrity and executing that. So you're having Garrity, who is moving on. He is letting go of his revenge. He is sacrificing himself, pushing DeVries forward to have him win because he thinks he is the better person and deserves it more. For DeVries then to completely change and actually revert back into his old self. So there are two angles to that. One is the change of the person back to their old negative self, and then on the other side, DeVries then shooting the mayor, ending the dystopian society and promoting a sort of flavor of hope, if you will. And that for me is where the ending changes the meaning of the story, where the book is nihilistic at its core with that bleak, open ending, no resolution, no change, to a glimmer of hope with DeVries shooting the mayor. Also, in the book, the society is much bigger. In the book, the mayor takes on a role of the society and everything that is wrong with the society. By adding the revenge story in the movie, the mayor becomes much more a person versus a symbol of everything that is wrong with the system, which I think shrinks the scope of the story, right? It's the big world versus a very limited view of what's going on in the world. Also, one thing that I found interesting, I believe it wasn't directly said in the book, but there was some underlying notion of, because the mayor is just a representation of the system, if you would kill him, he's replaceable. Someone else would take his job, or someone else would take up where he left off, and then the system would continue. You know, like a Hydra where you cut off the head and two new come up. That is very much taken away in the movie. Even though the movie is still somewhat open-ended, you actually don't know if society now changes. You actually don't even know what happens with DeVries at the end of the movie. You'd still see him walk away, even though it's without any crowds and it's kind of very empty and quiet as he walks away. So it could be the meaning of he was killed and he is now, you know, walking for the rest of his eternal life or something. So it's still unclear of exactly how hopeful his last action really was. Also, while I understand that in a movie you might not want to show 16-year-old boys, the fact that they are so much older, even though no one ever talks about age, but they picked actors that are 30 to play these people. So to me, the movie characters are clearly not 16. They're much older. So just that more psychological awareness changes the tone a little bit for me as well. To sum it all up, the book to me is a very dark view into an oppressive regime, into a dystopian society where change is really hard, if not even impossible to achieve, whereas the movie takes on a more conventional dystopian world where hope generally is a big part of. I mean, look at Hunger Games, which is completely inspired by The Long Walk, both the movie and the book. The big aspect of that story is hope, and the movie does the same thing. I've read a couple of articles that talked about the reasoning for that being that the movie is adjusted to today's world and today's society a bit more. I don't know. I'm not talking to King or Lawrence to figure out if that's the case. It would explain a lot, though, because it would make sense that you would want a more hopeful ending to this movie given the current political climate here. It still changes the tone of the story at a fundamental level. I fell in love with The Long Walk as weird as it sounds, because of this nihilistic approach. I appreciated that about the story because to me, not everything needs hope, right? Like a good story with something to think about that keeps you engaged with the story even after you close the book is incredible to me. Like the fact that King was capable of doing that and creating something like this without ever batting an eye. I don't know. Like this man, sometimes I wonder what he is dreaming about all day long. But that's what makes this story unique to me. The movie becomes much more a commodity, like every other dystopian novel out there. That's my opinion on that. Which ending did you prefer? Did you think it was a good improvement to the story? Or do you actually prefer the more nihilistic approach in the book? Let me know that in the comments. And then if you have not enough of The Long Walk yet, join Jake, Stacy, Ian, Amanda, Kate, and myself at the Long Walk readathon over at the Bookish Drummer Discord, where throughout the entire month of October, we're reading books to fulfill prompts and then walk forward on a Long Walk inspired game board. One of the things that we're also going to do as part of the read along is a Long Walk buddy read. So join us there. All the links are down in the description below. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed my conversation. I'm looking forward to your thoughts down in the comments. And then I'll see you soon with another one of my videos. Till then, have an amazing rest of your day. Bye.